emergency for the first time in about...
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus. You have accessed entry 734.PS9010, certificate number 48149, longitudinal film.
I'm going to work in Woolworths. When I grow up, I want to be an astronaut. When I get married, I'd like to have 2 children. My heart's desire is to see my daddy. I don't want to answer that.
Now, I presume we're speaking to some kind of future species that has no worries about aging.
I think that's a safe assumption.
I mean, it's taken us as a species a few thousand years, and we've maybe pushed the envelope a couple decades just with penicillin and hair implants.
Right, but gene therapy and whatnot, I mean, I'm assuming that...
It's got to be coming, right?
Sure, the futurelings are made entirely out of genes.
There are 100 ways to do this. With cloning, or, they could be robots. They could be...
Right.
What's the animal that doesn't age? Portuguese man-o-war or lobster or something? Isn't there some animal that just lives forever unless...
Yeah, lobsters live forever.
Is that true?
I think that's common knowledge.
Unless you put them in a bisque.
Right, yeah. The only thing that can kill a lobster is a pot.
Is a pot of boiling water. Is an old man from Maine.
Or another lobster.
It's like diamonds. Nothing can scratch a lobster except another lobster.
But
maybe that's why nature made lobsters so delicious. So just so they would have...
To control the population.
Yeah, otherwise there would just be billions of immortal lobsters.
I see. I do feel like probably the majority of our listeners are some kind of AI. And in fact, maybe it's just AIs based on you and me. So there may be like a billion different...
We recorded enough of these that the show became sentient.
The show became sentient, right. And so they're like billions of you and me, but separated by just minor sort of... random errors.
Every time they meet on the street, the John robots and the Ken robots meet on the street, it's a 58-minute conversation with a mattress ad in the middle, and then they go their way. Our future audience will not be able to appreciate how central aging and the transitoriness, the ephemerality of everything is to the human outlook and spirit in our time.
It's really all we think about.
It's 100% of what... When are you most aware of aging? Are there things that happen during the day that make you... Because on the inside, how old do you think you are?
Oh, my internal age.
Yeah. I feel like I'm 29. I just assume I'm 29, and then it takes me a second to realize that's, almost 2 decades off.
Things were going great for me at 29, but I still didn't realize things were going great. And I think the problem is that if I could go back to being 29 with the wisdom I had at 38, I think I would like to be 29. But I didn't really come into wisdom of any kind as regards myself until I was in my...
I like that you want to be your wisest age.
Late 30s.
And not just the age when you could do the most pull-ups.
Yeah, the problem with me in my 20s is that I was awful. I mean, not just awful in the world, but also awful to myself. So I didn't enjoy it, even when I was sitting on top of the 20s heap.
There's a funny Mark Twain short story called Captain Stormfield Visits Heaven, where we find out that everybody in heaven is actually old. They have not. You can be any age you want, but they have all chosen to be old. Everybody gets there and tries to be a young, a young, vibrant person again, and they quickly tire of it because you can't go from being a the 70-year-old who died on Earth. It turns out you realize you're annoyed by that. You don't want that again.
Yeah.
So everybody gradually ages up, and they finally just wind up at the age they died at, because so heaven's just full of old men sitting around barrels at general stores.
Yeah, and old women just wishing that the old men would get out of the house for a while.
Yeah,
leave them alone.
So maybe that's true. Maybe, but I feel like in my dream. How old are you in your dreams?
Oh.
I'm always young in my dreams.
Yeah, I don't know. In my dreams, I'm probably. Well, in my dreams, I'm like 9.
Yeah, exactly. On some level, my brain does not know I'm middle-aged because all my dreams are in high school or my grandma's house when I was a kid.
But physically, there was a sweet spot for me where I had most of my capabilities. The problem was that because I was a drinker and a drug user in my youth, I beat up my body. Like the last time that my body was not trashed I was 19, and from 19 to 26 I sustained so many lasting injuries that if I go back to any time after 25 or 26, I still have to deal with the fact that I'm all messed up, right? My knee and my hands and my teeth and my head are all crisscrossed with battle wounds.
But people don't know. You're a near perfect physical specimen at 50. You are
for sure.
You're getting better with age in a way that society and possibly genetics only allows certain men to do given our awful.
I think as I get older, I do get more attractive by the world standards.
To yourself,
but not to myself. I mean,
really?
Hopefully, I am personality-wise more attractive.
But you like to post goofy pictures of you back in the day with goofier glasses.
Yeah, but that all that is that kind of strange low self-esteem, self-effacement where it's like, look at me, and and you hope desperately that people are like, you were cute, but most of the people are like, your face is weird.
At some point you need to give up on that ploy. It'll work this time.
That thing you said on the podcast where you said your face is weird, you were right.
Now you're gonna think of the outpouring of goodwill you're gonna get now.
I know.
From all eras of
I am
existence.
not fishing for compliments, honestly.
He is absolutely fishing for compliments.
Please do not compliment
and
me.
lobsters.
Unless, of course, you want to go out on a date with me, and in which case, please submit your application.
This is what the show is for now?
Ken Jennings. Just send an email. Ken will read it, and he'll decide whether you seem like a good match for
I've decided I want you to settle down, and this is now what the show is all about.
You're going to be the Yenta of my future.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you're going to be the Yentl.
I'm going to be the Yentl.
We're going to find you your Mandy Patinkin, John.
Oh, he was so cute then.
So during the day, when do things happen that make you feel older? Like I no longer, when I'm with my kids, I no longer prance the way I once could.
Really?
I used to prance.
Yeah, of course you did.
Not in a gay way.
No, but just like in a
if there's a railing or a rockery, I would hop on up it.
Sure, in an elfin way.
Why not?
You would prance.
Why if there's a rockery there and nobody's walking on it?
Get up there.
What a waste of a rockery.
Get up on that rockery.
And today I do the same thing, and then I'm like, my knees don't do that.
I mean, honestly, without getting into too much detail, when I used to sit with my dad and his 80-year-old cohort and listen to them try and argue about who did more heavy lifting in World War II, one of the popular topics of conversation among guys that age is their prostates. They all have something to say about their prostate. And they would talk for hours about them.
What do you want? A big one? A small one?
I think you want a small one. And I would sit at the table and
that's a nice twist in when it comes to male genitalia.
And I would say after a while, you guys, come on. Can we talk about something else? Let's go back to arguing about World War II. This is so boring. And they would turn angry and go, you have no idea. One day, your prostate will be all you think about. And I'd blow them off, scoff at them. And then one day I was like, what is wrong with me? And it was that my prostate was now bigger than it used to be. And it's such a pain in the neck. It's such a pain in the prostate.
The neck. Yeah.
It's and so that's the thing I think that most commonly reminds me that something's happened. That and the fact I can't see anymore.
Yeah, that's true. I am. So I'm not quite. I am. Yeah, I definitely noticed that.
You're 5 years younger than me.
I'm not, but I'm not knocking out the back of the urinal anymore, John.
Right.
And I got to say, I noticed it watching myself on TV recently.
That's a common problem that people have.
Well, it's not, but people don't know how traumatic it is.
Oh, to see yourself.
They're showing clips of me on Jeopardy when I'm 29, and then you cut back to me, and I look puffy, and I've got bags under my eyes. And
but at 29, you wore those suits that were made out of what seems to be like made out of moss and tofu or whatever. Like those suits were not.
What does JCPenney's make those? It's some kind of oiled paper.
Yeah,
some kind of waxed paper. I think that's slightly rainproof.
They were all the color of toilet scum, and your ties were weird. And now you're like a really good dresser. I thought you were as sharp as a tack.
Did you know they sent Alex's wardrobe guy up to Seattle, and we went to Nordstrom together?
No, really?
Yeah, and he pulled stuff for me.
Why didn't they do that with James? or did they? They
did.
They went to the sporting goods store.
For buzzer ergonomic reasons, he does not want to wear a jacket. He wants to wear something loose and comfy, and so they bought him an array of very nice cashmere V-necks.
Oh, too bad it didn't help him.
Yeah, that's why. If he had shown some proper respect to Mr. Trebek and worn a jacket, we don't even know how far that guy could have gone.
You know, the thing is
that's not his final form.
The tie, a tight tie around your neck actually keeps more blood in your brain for longer because it can't go back.
It keeps wrong answers out of your mouth.
That's right.
I was about to say...
Keeps them down in your spleen.
I was about to say the capital of Tanzania was Dar es Salaam, and it couldn't get out. It's Dodona now. But so I had that experience and people on the internet would be like, this guy doesn't age. And I'm like, oh no, honey.
You see it, huh?
I'm so puffy right now.
We could both be less puffy, you and I.
So I immediately started losing weight. Like nothing had motivated me for years to eat healthier, and being on a game show for a week has changed my approach to life.
What are your stratagem? Losing weight, because you're, I mean, without giving away too much, a prominent member of your family, I would say one of the key members of your family,
Top
immediate
10.
family, has undergone a real transformation in the last several months. I
am trying to do the same thing. I'm trying to have no sugar, no flour, 16-hour fast every day.
Right.
So you eat dinner and then you don't eat again until mid-morning. It's very doable.
That's the Adam Savage model.
Is that true? Is that what he does?
He for a long time, I think maybe still, would not eat before sundown. But all that presumes that you wake up in the morning.
Is Adam Savage Muslim?
No. Oh, right. He's living in a state of permanent Ramadan.
Permanent Ramadan. That's his new.
Permanent Ramadan is a killer.
Yeah.
Band name.
There's an album title. You can write that down.
The problem is that would work in the 80s, but I couldn't have an album called Permanent Ramadan.
Well, you don't want to have a cartoon of Muhammad on the cover of it.
No.
The main thing is I don't believe it's clearing toxins out of me to fast every day, but it's definitely. I don't know if it's getting me closer to God, but it just keeps me from snacking before I go to bed.
It doesn't work for me because I will eat 16,000 calories worth of ice cream at 1 o'clock in the morning and then go immediately to bed.
Not if you're doing this. Not if Adam Savage has come to you in a dream, glowing.
1 o'clock in the morning is after dark.
No,
it's before dawn.
Just 16 hours of no eating.
Oh, I see.
Like if you eat dinner at 6, you cannot eat again until 10 a.m.
That's super easy. I'll eat 16,000 calories of ice cream at 1 a.m. and then I won't eat until 6 p.m.
The first time I tried this, I did find that it just made me much more efficient. I was like, hell, I can eat 2,500 calories in 8 hours. Watch me. I took it as a challenge.
Right.
But one thing about the passage of time and watching yourself age is, two things. One is that you're not aware of it.
As it happens.
As it happens. It's so gradual. There's a thing in, I think it's something Thomas Mann says in Death in Venice about how an hourglass appears to not be draining at all at the beginning.
Right.
You see the sand coming out, time is passing, but it seems to be at the same level. The top is just flat.
Right.
And then that's true until the very end. And then you turn into a vortex of, an inescapable vortex of time grabs you and age grabs you.
The most graphic, example of this for me was when my daughter was born, my beard was brown. My mustache has always been blonde, and I had a little bit of blonde around my chin, but it was dark brown beard. And and my daughter's 8 now, and in the last 8 years, if you look at pictures of me you just see the white coming into my beard. And now my beard is almost entirely white.
Let me get this straight. You are blaming this on the stress of that your daughter has introduced to your life.
I don't think so, but it coincides, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, and this
That's
is
just 8 years. Yeah.
This is 8 years, but it's 8 years between the age of 41 and, 10 years between 40. I guess I was 43 when she was born. But the degree to which my whitening beard has aged me, because now people routinely ask my daughter, like, "Are you out for a walk with Granddad?" And I'm like, "You villains!" And it's typically older guys that say that. No woman has ever said that. It's always some guy that's 15 years older than me.
Well, that's a silver lining for you. To the women, you still have a youthful twinkle in your eye, apparently.
I guess, but it absolutely is true. If I see a picture of me or catch a glimpse in a mirror, I'm like, oh, look at Kris Kringle here. And it's not, I don't even have red in my beard anymore.
The other thing about the passage of time, in addition to its terrifying suddenness, is that art has never been able to depict it really. Like, for centuries, the passage of time has been one of the chief concerns of human experience. But how do you paint it? How do you write a concerto about it? Even big sprawling family novels, that's what attempts it, is,
right.
The Forsyth Saga or
right.
War and Peace,
right.
Some book where literally decades go by. And you'll finish a novel like that and you will kind of feel like you have understood everything from Kunta Kinte up to Alex Haley. And, you'll feel like time has passed, but really not. Like in another way, I just read that all on the same airplane flight. We
love our sagas, right? Our Star Warses and our Harry Potters, where we watch characters age, and Star Wars has been coming out now for 40 years.
Harry Potter and Star Wars are interesting cases because we have experienced them. Kids grew up with Harry Potter aging roughly the same age as him. But is there any equivalent to that in to a 10th century Norseman?
You could have a concerto where the organ plays a single note for 15 years.
Really, that's it. John Cage playing very slowly. That's about the only way that that music, for example, would help us understand the gradual change and, in some ways, decline that is aging. In painting, they would often, really all they would do is they'd do a still life, but they'd put a skull in it.
Right.
And that's it. They'd be like, hey, we're painting fruit and stuff, but guess what? Here's a skull, suckers. That's coming, but that's all you could do.
One thing that happens is landscape architecture, landscape gardening.
That's a great point.
Right? Like if you were building an English garden around a manor house, it's only going to come to fruition after 40 years or something, right? And
it'll come to fruition sooner, but
right. but the whole design only matures.
You only get the trees the right height.
And it's really the gardens that your grandfather planted that are fully realized. So I could see, if you travel in the English countryside, you become so aware of it being just a masterwork of a whole people's.
But I wonder if the rich guy commissioning that would often, he doesn't want to leave it to his grandkids to see the vision.
Right.
He's going to want full-size trees trucked in from somewhere, right?
I guess the Sagrada Familia is an example.
Yeah,
right?
Architecture that'll never be finished. In our age, we've really kind of finally developed an art form that will grapple with this, need to understand our own aging and our own changing.
Instagram.
I call it Instagram. People do this at home now. People will take a picture of themselves every day for 10 years, and suddenly you have a record of them online. This is something I thought about doing as a kid. I remember, I'd look at my yearly Sears portrait studio photo, and I would be like, I want to see it like age in real time, like a Twilight Zone episode.
There was an app for this. I'm sure there are 50 apps for it now, but I started doing it in 2014, taking a picture of myself every day in the same location, which was I would go for a walk out to Seward Park and get out there on the beach
every day.
Every day.
You didn't live that close to the beach at Seward Park.
Because this was part of a whole project of like, I'm going to lose weight and exercise and stop, and shrink my prostate through exposure to UV rays.
I went out on the beach at Seward Park and would massage my prostate every day.
Every day until I got arrested. But I took my picture every day for, 10 days or 2 weeks. And then I was like, boy, it's sure rainy out. I think I'll skip today. And I never went back.
One day. That's what's going to happen to my no sugar, no flour thing for sure. But yeah, so the ability of video, photography, and then video, moving photography has really given us the chance to consider this in a way we never have before. In 1955, the BBC had been a radio and then television monopoly, a semi-official, kind of a government organ for British subjects for many decades. And in 1955, ITV came on the air. Finally a competitor to BBC. The ITV franchisee in Northern England was Granada Television, still to this day one of the some mainstay and powerhouse of British TV.
I never understood how it was called Granada.
But it's in Manchester?
Yeah, given that that's a town in Spain.
I feel like Granada should have a local public TV station called Manchester.
Yeah, Manchester TV.
And that's where they watch, Doctor Who.
What does I in ITV stand for?
Independent, I think.
Independent
I don't know.
TV?
Because that is the idea. Like, why is there a state TV organ?
Sure.
We should be able to watch our gardening shows and news in Welsh. And,
News in Welsh, that's a great title for an album. I will use that.
And cheap looking sci-fi. Like, we should have that on multiple channels and not just BBC 1 through 4. I mean, and it really caused both stations to up their game.
Right.
British TV got a lot better once somebody besides the Home Secretary was running it. But one of the early hits, so this was based in Manchester, so it was kind of away from the London culture, and they were able to do different and more exciting things. They had a documentary program called World in Action, series of kind of interesting documentaries about Britain today. Yeah, exactly. It's actually got this kind of, I've heard this theme many times, this kind of weirdly ominous, thunderous. It sounds like the music from The Prisoner, kind of. Dun-dun-dun-dun,
World in Action.
You're going to be very interested in the price of British cotton if you hear the dun-dun-dun-dun at the beginning. And one of their staffers was actually a Canadian filmmaker named Paul Almond, who was interested in what he claimed, and I think this is true, to be a Jesuit maxim. You would know. You're the show's resident Jesuit expert.
Right. Jesuit affiliate.
Yeah, he was fascinated with something that he had once heard from the Jesuits. Give me a child until he is 7, and I will show you the man.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, or, the person, although, as we'll see, this was a more sexist time. And I don't know, do you believe in this? Do you believe in this idea that we are essentially fully formed by the time our childhood is in full blossom?
Well, when we were younger, it was very common, and it was a familiar and a familiar topic for argument, whether nature or nurture played a larger role in the development of a person.
But you could go either way and still say the child is fully formed. The most formative years are before 7.
Right.
So have nature and nurture already done their work?
The thing is, having reflected on this for a long time, and having a child, of course, you become aware of how much nature plays a role in who a person is.
I'll tell you what, having 2 children is what teaches you that.
Is that right?
Because you're like, I did the same thing and none of this stuff works on her. She came out of the tap totally different temperature.
Yeah, my daughter walked into the world and I was like, who do you think you are? And she was 6 months old, But when you talk to other adult humans and you ask them what really was formative, we all spend a little bit of time saying like, oh, when I was 7, somebody gave me spoiled milk in my Kool-Aid or whatever. Don't put milk in Kool-Aid is the lesson there. But really what makes you into an adult person is what happens between 7th grade and your senior year in high school, right? I mean, that's where you learn all the hard stuff about being a human. And you everybody walks into 7th grade, with whatever damage, but that's
where the trauma actually comes.
Yeah, but depending on how you field middle school and those early years of high school.
And a lot of it's probably biological, the changes you're going through.
Right.
Like you've kind of gone from generic kid to untapping whatever hormones are going to do to you.
And your emotions come online.
Right.
But I feel like what the Jesuits were saying is, like, I think both you and I probably avoided a lot of
Jesuits?
I didn't. No, you probably did.
Until you were 7. Until we were 7, we both did a great 100% Jesuit avoidance.
But when we hit 7th grade, both of us had a moral foundation taught to us by our parents and communities.
Yeah.
So that those initial temptations of like, hey, John, come on out behind the dumpster and let's huff some gas. I had a foundation enough to say like, no, thank you. I choose to study.
That tailed off at some point for you.
At some point it did, but I think, I didn't first smoke marijuana until I was, probably 17, because up until that point, I still had that foundation that was telling me like, you're not a drug user. But
doesn't that mean you were the teen that you were when you were 7? Like your parents had created Just Say No, John. Except
that when I finally did smoke pot, it was because of what had happened to me between the ages of 13 and 17. And I think, having gone the direction I did is entirely a product not of what the neglect I experienced as a 7-year-old. It was a product of the peer relationships I had and the way that I was perceiving the world.
You know who doesn't like to hear that?
Teen.
Parents.
Well, right, and Jesuits.
Well, Jesuits hate it. Jesuits hate him because that is the one weird trick that parents don't like to know about. That you can do whatever you want, but it's really going to be what happens to your childhood when body chemistry and brain chemistry change, and they're suddenly surrounded by influential peers.
Right. You can give them a book that's all about like healthy sexual relationships and loving your body. But if you go to junior high and your best friend is like, your butt is fat, you need to start puking. You're gonna
suddenly
who are you gonna listen to?
It doesn't matter like that for a decade. Mom and dad gave you good advice, fed and clothed you, everything was going great. Suddenly, if you like Susan's hair,
right,
and she's being mean, that will destroy your life.
Yeah.
I couldn't get my kids to read anything anymore because no matter what kind of home I thought I was raising them in,
what do you
phones
think?
got invented, and then I can't get my kids to read a book now. I lost them.
What was your most disastrous peer relationship when you were a teen? Who did you the worst or the most disservice? I
feel like I may have escaped unscathed. Like
no one gave you a complex of any kind?
I have almost none of that. Like I had people who I thought, I had the typical kind of childhood and early adolescent trauma of somebody I thought was a close friend, and then suddenly they wouldn't even give me the time of day. And
they were someone else's
They
friend.
were hanging out with Eric instead. Boo.
So Eric had moon boots.
So some of that, but I feel like nobody was really bullying me, making me feel awful about myself. Like I was in charge of that.
Right.
I was like, Ken, you're a weird kid, and when you're a kid, you're blissfully weird, and then when you're a teen, you're self-consciously, cripplingly weird.
But did you feel like an outsider?
Yeah.
Did you? So at some point,
I did it to myself. Nobody did it.
But there was you did go into a period where you were like, I'm excluded, but you embraced it. You dove deeper into it. Like
no, I just went in the closet about it. It wasn't until later in life that I was like, oh, actually, if you're into trivia,
look, you spit that word on the floor.
Like my give me a child until he is 7 is like, I think of myself as a kid just being addicted to game shows and like I've said this on the show, keeping notebooks full of Family Feud boards and stuff.
Right. You were an 80-year-old.
Right. But that's the imprint of my whole life. Like the Jesuits were right about me. Like my job turned out to be game show guy. And when I was an adolescent, I was kind of in the closet about being that kind of a weird brain.
It's not a great look on a 16-year-old.
No, if you want to date, you don't want to show the girl your Family Feud notebooks.
Let's go down to the lookout point. And you're like, well,
let's hide under the bleachers and look at your
$100,000 pyramid is on.
So, but at some point I came out of it. Like I think, you did, although maybe on a different timeline. And I feel like in my case, what reasserted itself was just the basic elements of me at 7.
Right. Okay. And I guess that's true of me too, right? I mean, I still have that grounding. Even in my worst drug days, I had pretty strong, a code, right? A strong code.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't steal. I wouldn't deal. Although I was a user, right? I had all these borders. that somehow I maintained through periods where it was like, are you sure you don't steal? Because stealing right now would
really help.
It would really help you, even if you bent that rule a little bit. And I was like, I don't steal. And I don't know how you would get that that rebar in your life in any way other than in those first 7 years.
I mean, at some point, it's all related to how we all turn into mom or dad, I guess. Is one of the things that kind of reasserts that your core 7-year-old character is the fact that as you age, I don't even know if it's genetics or if it's just how you saw adulthood modeled, different periods of life modeled. Like everybody turns into their
My parents didn't steal.
Way. See?
One thing.
One thing about your mom is she never shoplifted to buy crack.
My dad also did not steal. I don't know. I can't account for it. Maybe that's what they saw. They saw in each other.
0 for 2. Common interests include not jacking cars.
How do you feel about stealing? Not into it. Great.
So given that maxim, Paul Allman, this Canadian guy, thought, what a perfect premise for a documentary. Let's he had done some math and realized that in
film stock was cheap enough that
right, 16 millimeter black and white stock. No, in 1964, he realized the British the Society of Tomorrow, the Adult Society of Tomorrow, had already been born and were in primary school. As he said in his documentary, the executive and the shop steward of the year 2000 are now 7 years old.
Right.
So he thought, if I interview
he believed the children were his future.
Exactly, in a literal way. And he thought, if I interview a bunch of 7-year-olds, this will be a look at what Britain will be like in the year 2000. Now, this is, if the Jesuits are right. So I guess he thought, and that's only true if really this was kind of a smokescreen for his real interest, which was the British class system of the mid 20th century.
Did he predict that everyone would vote Tory, and did he predict Brexit? Because if he did,
he wanted to talk to a broad variety of kids, and that includes upper class public school twits with Tory parents, and cheeky East London Cockney kids. This is his idea of diversity in 1964.
Sure.
Of the 14 kids interviewed, only 4 are women.
Right, and they're all white.
Yeah, there's actually one biracial kid from a children's home. Like he went to an orphanage to find a black kid. And the weird thing is there's only 4 girls. And really, it's because he thought he wanted to deal with the
future ruling class,
the workers of tomorrow, the occupations of tomorrow, and that's not going to be served by talking to 4 moms.
No, just be 4 housewives.
He was behind the curve in 1964, and
so he didn't predict Margaret Thatcher.
Even in 1964, he had not predicted any element of the sexual revolution, which maybe in 1964 you should have been able to do.
I mean,
Beatlemania should have told you.
Sure, Princess Anne.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, she was moving the ball.
When Princess Anne was not allowed to marry that Air Force guy.
That was it. That was
that's Margaret. When Margaret
I'm sorry. That's right. Princess Margaret.
Are you thinking of Margaret?
I was thinking of Margaret, too.
When Margaret's not allowed to marry the Air Force guy, he was like, see, I don't need women on this show.
Yeah.
He left the recruiting of the children up to a staff, which included kind of a young, bright, ambitious Cambridge grad named Michael Apted.
Well, that's the best part about this story is that he had even this little upstart project had like a staff.
No shortage of. It's really well made. So I've seen this documentary several times, and I've seen clips from it dozens and dozens of times, and I'll explain why. It's a really well-made little documentary where they interview all these kids separately. They go all over Britain, again, orphans in London at children's homes, cheeky but poor East London boys and girls.
How many kids?
Public school twits, 14 kids. He goes up to the Yorkshire Dales. He goes out to the countryside. The idea is to get a cross-section of Britain, and he just asks them, what they want to be when they grow up. How do they see the Britain of their future, and asks them what they want to do for a living. And the kids have been chosen by this Michael Apted guy and others, and apparently in conjunction with the school. So schools were approached and offered their best and brightest. So you get these impossibly funny, charismatic, smart kids.
Right.
Because, I'm sure the vast majority of British children in 1964 were just as dull-witted just as lurpy as all your kids' friends today.
It was just like the way they cast the film Bugsy Malone. They went around England and were like, "Who's the cutest kid in your school?"
You might as well be going to one of those awful children beauty pageants, because they get these amazing bright-eyed kids, and they ask them what they want to do when they grow up, and they get funny answers. You know, the girl from East London says, "I want to work in a Woolworths." And this little boy says, "I would like to be an astronaut, but if I can't be an astronaut, I would be a coach driver."
Yeah,
and
but it's a version of the same thing.
This smart kid from this tiny Yorkshire farm says, "I'd like to learn all about the moon and all that." Maybe the best are probably the best interviews are probably with this this cheeky. I've said the word cheeky a million times.
You have,
because it's London in 1964.
Sure, there's no other way to describe
Everybody's
the
cheeky.
little urchins.
This precocious little, small little ball of energy. This 7-year-old named Tony from East London,
covered in coal dust, presumably.
He wants to be a jockey. Yeah, jockey. I want to be a jockey. Yeah, jockey. He's always dreamed of, and he's small, so it's perfect. And you see this kid, just roughhousing and swinging punches, and he's asked, you ask him a question, like he's just a soundbite machine. Is it important to fight? Yes. They ask him about, Paul, you hear this Canadian accented voice asking about the class system. And you hear Tony be like, just rail about the poshies. He hates the poshies.
Sure, of course he does, because he's a pickpocket.
Oh, yes. Yeah, exactly. He needs to go pick their pockets and give it to Fagin. He does impressions of rich kids. Oh, yes, oh, yes, oh, yes. And then he mimics
that's all rich kids say.
He mimics just smashing them. Pow, And then he also interviews a trio of public school boys who we see singing Waltzing Matilda in Latin.
Future prime ministers all.
Exactly. And they know it. He asks them what the future holds, and they know exactly. They're going to go to St. Whatever's, and then it's on to Oxford, and they know where they're going to be at Oxford, and they know what they're going to study. And some of the kids forget their lines. Clearly, this is something that's been told to them by their own fathers.
Yeah.
But these kids are just a delight, even though they're the future twits of the future Mr. Beans of England.
Right, because children are charming.
Yes, children, and even when they're unlikable, I read the Financial Times, says one of these 7-year-olds, and the other one says, I read the Observer and the Times. And then the third one jumps in and says, what do you like about it? And he says, well, I read the headlines, and then I read about them, about it. And some other kid talks about how he likes to look at his shares. He looks at his shares every morning in the Financial Times. And the other kid says, yes, because you're a miser. And it's no problem to get these kids to say the most awful classist things about how, of course, schools shouldn't have to admit the poor, because then the poor people would come rushing in. And how would Sir pay the masters? So these kids are just a fountain of kind of...
Sure, God bless them.
1920s or 1890s sounding E.M. Forster kind of rich kid dialogue. It's beautiful. It has not aged a day. So it's an amazing little documentary. He gets them all together. They all have a day out in London where you hear them.
All 14 kids?
All 14 kids mixing.
So does Tony bash any of the poshies?
You actually see, they go to the zoo, and one of the poor kids, I think, is throwing popcorn to the polar bear, and the public school kids are just outraged. You stop that at once, because there's a sign, He's not going to let these ruffians throw popcorn to the polar bear. You see them dancing to some kind of Beatles-alike kind of Merseyside sound.
Right.
And they all go to, at the end of our very special day in London, we took the children all to an adventure playground. And you see them kind of running around in what looks like the rubble of the Blitz.
Sure, totally dangerous.
The world's most dangerous playground. Exposed nails.
50-gallon drum with a fire in it.
Exactly. And they kind of try to predict what's going to happen. Like the boys from the children's home start building a house. Like, oh, these kids don't have a house.
Oh, so they're doing the sociologist thing.
The narrator is a sociologist.
Oh, so it's a little bit of a cultural anthropology happening.
Exactly.
Notices this child whose parents were laborers as he immediately starts to build.
And this Paul Allman guy coming from Canada is, criticizing, there's an implicit critique of the British class system.
Right.
That, this, no matter how, this kid doesn't think he has any possibilities. This little girl seems so bright and smart, but all she can think of is she wants to work in a Woolworths.
Right.
Whereas these three kids have their futures all mapped. And there was no thought that they would, that this would be any more than a one-off documentary. But 7 years later, in the early 70s, Michael Apted had started to become a talented and important documentarian. He decided he would catch up with all these kids and see what they were up to. The movie was called 7 Up. Have you ever seen any of the soft drink? These kids are 7, but they're aging up. Have you seen any of the work on these kids, the documentaries?
So the Up series of films,
it turns into a series, has
always appealed to me. I've read a lot of critical talking around them, but I have been extremely shy about watching any of the films. And I've seen clips, as you said, I've seen clips many times of these lovable kids, and then as they become, older people.
Why do you not want to watch?
I can't account for it. I know that one came out recently.
Mm-hmm. This is last year.
And I remember over the course of my own life, every 7 years, kind of like a cicada, these films reappear, right. And I'm like, oh, those films, right? And I've meant to sit down and watch them all.
Does it feel like homework now that you've missed 50, 60 years of them? Or?
No, what it was the first time I heard of it, which probably would have been the third iteration.
28 Up got international release and were champions, especially 28 Up.
Yeah,
and 35 Up got a lot of international acclaim. Ebert referred to them as one of the 10 greatest films ever made.
So when 28 Up came out, what year would it have been? I would have been...
That'd be 21 years after 64, so mid-80s.
Right, so I would have been a teenager. Mm-hmm. And I think at that point...
We're both a little younger than this cohort.
Yeah, I would have been... I was so burned out on boomer self-celebration that I was like, I can't just watch another thing about them. And then as time went on,
you would just watch Family Ties if you wanted that.
Yeah, that's right. Or like if I want boomer self-celebration, I'll watch Hogan's Heroes. But then as their problems started to kind of presage mine a little bit, like, oh boy, they're 35 now, and here I am at the ripe old age of 25, and then it was like, I don't want to know. It felt a little bit like I don't want to look into the future. I don't want to see a bunch of kids that used to be gifted and now are just troubled.
There is you cannot watch the show without thinking about your own life,
right?
Your own choices, maybe your kids' lives as well, your own choices of those times.
I didn't
your
want
own
that.
Mortality.
I still don't. Like when it came out most recently and so much of the writing about it was like, oh, isn't it a pity that little Billy, who showed so much promise, is now, just like such a sad, broken man. I was like, please don't make me see that.
And you got to admit that a lot of the appeal of the movies is voyeuristic.
Yeah.
It's like a soap opera, but the new episode only comes out every 7 years.
Right.
And you want to know what happened to him. Did he actually get the divorce or not? Because Apted continued to check in with these kids every 7 years. In 1970, they're all kind of surly teens,
right.
And he gets them all back together, and it's hilarious because you see these little bright-eyed kids who just won't shut up about their dreams and hopes and friends and everything, and then cut to they won't even look at the camera. They're just rolling their eyes. They're openly telling the interviewer they don't want to do this. At 7, they ask one of the kids about girls, and he says, "I don't." It's the Yorkshire kid. I don't want to talk about that. I don't answer such questions. And they ask him again at 14, and he's like, "Are you asking me because last time I said I don't answer such questions?" Yeah, I thought so. So they invent this. You start to see the birth of this thing where they will juxtapose clips of a 7-year-old and a 14-year-old, and you realize, oh, there's something there.
Oh, so in the second film, they actually showed clips of the first film.
What's central to the series is that they catch you up. They don't assume you have seen this 1966 documentary. Oh. They start this pattern of kind of reintroducing each kid, showing them what they wanted at 7, and then kind of taking you through their lives up to this point. And that continues up until the most recent installment, 63 Up, which came out in 2019. That would be the 9th installment.
And so in 63 Up, do they refer back to all 9 prior episodes? Do you see them?
The thing would be 8 hours long. It has been getting longer over time. I think it now airs over 3 nights on ITV and is then later repackaged for international theatrical release. So it has been getting longer, but basically you see the childhood clips. And then you see a few updates. This guy later moved to Australia. She got married. He's on his second marriage.
So it's worth watching all of the films in their original order.
If you watch any one of them, you will get caught up. Mindy and I just did a big rewatch. And
of all of the films?
Yeah, starting in 1964. Because you do miss out. Because what you realize is the people, there's vast changes. 7 and 14 is just a huge gulf. And so 14 and 21 again. And after that, it starts to flatten out. Because really, what has a 49-year-old done that a 42-year-old has not?
Right.
And so every 7 years, in about a year in advance, they'll start to track the kids down again and kind of have to wheedle them into doing this interview again. Many of them are enthusiastic about them. Tony, the boy who wanted to be a jockey, did get to ride a few races. Turned out he couldn't do it. In the 7-year-old, in 7+7, he says his backup plan is now to drive a cab. And you see him driving a cab. And he enjoys this. He loves talking to an audience. He's had some notoriety. He talks about how, at one point he gives Buzz Aldrin a ride, and another cabbie wants an autograph, and he asks Buzz for an autograph. And the cabbie says, no, mate, you, because he recognizes him from, as the cheeky Cockney lad. So
that's good.
At some level, these people are celebrities.
Did anyone have a late in life transformation, or was everybody set in stone? The thing
that really made the series on the international stage happens in 28 Up. Just the most hopeful and impossibly heartbreakingly bright-eyed of the kids, Neil from Liverpool, starts to be a little more muted at 14. And by 21, he's squatting in London. And for 28 Up, he had dropped out of college, university, and is squatting in London, working at a building site. And by 28 Up, they couldn't even find him. They finally just track him down, just kind of tramping all over northern Britain. At one point, he's somewhere in the Hebrides. Just living in a camper off public benefits, obviously dealing with a lot of depression and anxiety. He's still like the most eloquent person, and he's wearing this big raincoat. He looks kind of like he's like a Russian poet or something. But now he's just talking at length about the disappointments of life and how he doesn't really have any hope for how things might be better. And next time you'll probably find me homeless on the streets of London. And it's just amazingly compelling because they intercut this with shots of the kid.
Right.
And you just think, what does life do to us? What do our minds and genetic legacies do to us? The funny thing is, after he says the thing about how next time you'll find me on the streets of London, in 35 Up, they cut to him walking in London with kind of an odd pork pie hat on. And you think, oh no, because everybody wants to know about poor Neil, what's going to happen to this guy. But he's actually walking to a city council meeting. He's entered politics and is now, he's still an odd guy, but he's volunteering for the Christmas panto at his local theater, and he's representing his constituents on the city council, and he's thinking about standing for parliament.
So he pulled it off.
Yeah. So you see the kind of the full range of an unexpected trough and an unexpected recovery in this guy. There is some class mobility, although not much. All of the East London kids are, Tony is probably the most. He used his fame for, his irrepressible personality and his fame from the documentary series to do a little acting work on the side. If you look him up on IMDb, he plays a series of cab drivers. He must be the actor who they know will bring his cab.
Right.
To the shoot.
And then he came out with a brand of steak sauce or something? I mean, how did he...
He wants to open a themed pub, and that doesn't quite take off. But he gets a summer place in Ibiza, and he kind of starts to live a middle-class lifestyle.
Right.
The East London girls do find good jobs, but they're obviously comfortable with their same set from their whole lives. And of course, the posh public school twits
become posh public school.
They all
twits?
do almost exactly the educational plan and even career plan they outlined at 7. This kid that said he was going to go to Oxford and be a barrister went to Oxford, and now he's a barrister.
Wow.
It really validates a lot of Paul Almond's suspicions about the child when he was 7 in early 60s Great Britain.
Right.
The only kid that drops out permanently. The kids kind of come and go because it's not a joy, apparently, to every 7 years get tracked down by a documentary crew and have to account for your life.
Bet not. Although I think I would enjoy it.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
I think I would be one of the ones that would have enjoyed the at 21 and at 28 being kind of portrayed as somewhat destitute, and then at
you're a real life Neil.
Yeah, then at 35 being able to say like, look, I survived, I made it. I mean,
you went into the arts and politics too, more successfully than Neil, but
no, he was actually on the council.
Well, but you're not directing the Christmas pantomime of Aladdin. Or
no,
whatever.
That's true. I mean, I did go into the arts.
I think for me, it would be like the introspection that would come with having to check in every 7 years and justify my existence.
Right, and that's stuff. That is what I mean. That's stuff I like, but that's what I do. Right, I do that for a living.
Podcasting is now doing this once a week.
Sure.
Or in your case, 4 to 5 times a week. instead of every 7 years. You're a cicada that just will not shut up.
I've been podcasting for almost what is it now? 8-9 years. And I do feel like it's a weekly record of exactly what I'm thinking about and doing for that entire period. And I mean, no one could be less interested in going back and looking at it than I am. But I hear from people all the time that have listened to the whole arc.
They see it as their
multiple times.
It's
right?
it's like Days of Our Lives for them. They want to see what happens next.
What happened to old Mr. Jinglestick? And I went through. I laid out several years of depression, and I would show up to the show and just be like, nothing, no one, nothing. So it'll be interesting to see 20 years from now what that all looks like. Yeah,
these Up series kids are probably the last, they're one of the last generations. I guess Gen X would be the last generation who would look askance at this kind of soul bearing on video, in public, for art.
Because of course we all do it.
Today we all do it. Instagram is just a 21 up that you add to every day. But these people are a little old for that, and so they have a conflicted relationship with the series. One of them refers to it as a poison pill that just pops up in her life every 7 years that she kind of dreads. Some kids have dropped out. The only kid that dropped out permanently is one of the upper class kids, and he actually became a successful documentary filmmaker.
But now he doesn't want anything to do with the series.
He does not want to be
interesting
part of how the sausage is made in this documentary.
That's weird.
Other kids come and go. One kid went away for a long time. Neil's friend Peter went away for decades, and suddenly he's back. So he wants to promote his rockabilly band. One of the upper class kids always managed to say just something awful about how great Maggie Thatcher was, or just if the poor would just try harder. Right. This kid John always just finds a terrible thing to say about how the program has misrepresented him, but shouldn't the poor just work harder? He drops out at some point, and he only comes back when he needs to promote his charitable ambitions in Bulgaria.
Right. He's trying to rehabilitate himself.
Yeah, I guess he and his wife both have kind of Balkan stock, and he's very involved in getting antibiotics to rural Bulgaria now, and he's always on the show shilling for donations now.
Well, I can imagine if you were on the show and the public consensus was that you were a villain, that every 7 years you would want to find a way to prove that you were a decent person. Unless
you relish, nobody in the show really relishes a heel turn the way you might see from a James Holzhauer on Jeopardy,
right? Who
just loves the chance to be a preening pro wrestler type,
right?
Nobody on the show has really embraced that. Maybe because they were just all they were all the smart, talkative kids in class, and,
right?
And they're people pleasers,
That's the hard. I mean, one of the hardest things to navigate is if you're a gifted kid and then that gift doesn't produce. Doesn't exceed expectations even. How to manage that disappointment, particularly if everyone in the world is watching.
Yeah.
And the movie comes out and there's a big editorial about like, oh, it's too bad that Betsy's life is such a drag. And
that's why Peter quit, honestly. The tabloids, he said that the Thatcher era government was the worst Britain had ever had. And of course, the Sun or whatever, the conservative, the Mirror, what's the worst? I don't know. Well, some conservative tabloid just made him into villain of the week. Back before, you could do that with Twitter.
Right.
And he just noped out. But the thesis of the documentary turns out to be essentially true. The little innocent, sweetest boy in the world, Bruce, ends up, teaching kids at 7, he says he wants to go to parts of the world and teach people who are not civilized to be more or less good. And at 28 up, he's in Bangladesh, like teaching at a little rural school with no clean water. And then he's in East London. He eventually sells out and becomes kind of a podgy cricket-playing dad.
Sure.
At some well-off private school in his 50s.
Sure, it always happens.
But you really can see that for the most part, the kids you saw at 7 are the core of them, when not derailed by mental illness, as in Neil's case.
So has anyone else attempted like a longitudinal series like this?
There were some spin-offs in America and Russia. Different countries have seen the success of 7-Up. Because what you see when you watch it is just that there's this special effect that cannot be duplicated. Just watching watching film footage juxtaposed between the same person at different ages as if they're talking to themselves as almost as different characters or just flipping around in a diary. It's just a special effect the movies can't do. And I remember thinking this as a kid, looking at bad age makeup in Back to the Future 2, or Brando looks all right in The Godfather, right? You know, there's some age makeup is better than others. But really, you'd watch a Twilight Zone or a Star Trek episode where your heroes age, and really they're just smearing white stuff in their hair.
Right.
And,
you know, the best one is Jackass 2.
What happens in Jackass 2?
Well, don't you remember? It's like... the guys of Jackass and maybe Tony Hawk, like they put on age makeup and then they go out.
Do they look good, or do they look like Eddie Murphy in Coming to America?
No, they look pretty darn good as old people. And then they have, walkers and they're walking down the street, but then they start doing kind of weird skateboard stunts.
They kick flips.
And freaking people out because, it's like granddad starts to
see somebody break a hip.
Yeah. And it's pretty good stuff.
I just think of it as, when I think of age makeup, I think of, Dustin Hoffman in some full face mask and Little Big Man.
Right.
The people just looked like mummies. They didn't look like old people. They looked like
Uncanny Valley.
A new species. Exactly. And so the fact that you could actually watch people age in real time was something that only these documentaries could do. And people started to attempt it in fictional film as well. Francois Truffaut, the great French New Wave director, his most beloved film is kind of an autobiographical thing about his own childhood called The 400 Blows, about his own rough childhood. He actually checked back in with that actor, Jean-Pierre Léaud, again 4 times and made 3 other full-length movies and a short subject kind of as this guy aged, checking back in with his fictional alter ego, Antoine Doinel, to see what he was up to. And it really is that same kind of voyeuristic, what's going to happen next? He's in his 20s. Even though I didn't know this person, it's really a weird thing about how our brains are wired. With your friends, of course, you want to hear the hot goss when they call you. But the fact that our brains are so wired that way that we want to know what happens to a stranger we just met, like what's going to happen to this kid in 7 years? Right. We get very invested in that.
It's interesting that of all the original Star Wars characters, obviously 3PO still looks great.
Fantastic.
Looks almost
shinier than ever.
Yeah, couldn't even see the passage of time once he got that red arm fixed.
Although he's got some dementia in the new one.
Yeah. But Carrie Fisher obviously didn't look like herself because she'd had some facial surgery. Han Solo didn't seem like himself because Harrison Ford has become such a corny actor that it just felt like he was playing Han Solo.
He's just talk show grump and pothead Harrison Ford.
Yeah, just like goof, and it just didn't seem like him. But it's Luke who somehow still manages to be a brat at the same time as he's like a weather-beaten, old, like gnarled root.
That's what the Jesuits used to say to Luke back on Tatooine. They'd be like, if you're a brat now... Yeah, so the Star Wars and the Harry Potter movies, as you mentioned, have become like the real example of kind of seeing people grow up with us. I mean, with the Star Wars, there was a long interregnum where, the prequels obviously didn't have that same kind of thrill. No. But the Harry Potter movies, you watch these kids grow up, and it really is, you think about the movie makers and just the crapshoot of, casting a 10-year-old and just fingers crossed.
Right.
That kid doesn't age weird, because we've all seen the sitcom where the little cute kid has an awkward adolescence, and they have to bring in a new Cousin Oliver kind of cuter kid because Rudy Huxtable is not cutting the mustard anymore.
It was the problem with Roseanne, the TV show Roseanne. They cast that young son who was a terrible actor when he was 5, and you think like, well, but he continued to be a terrible actor until it was
and now he's not adorable.
It was totally not tenable to have him on screen even.
So the initial casting feat of the Harry Potter movies was just brilliant because they knew we're going to be working with these guys for a decade. And
they managed to score 10 out of 10, right?
Plausible stars, yeah. Like the lead two are now legitimate leading men and women, and even Ron is kind of comic relief stuff. The director who has kind of dipped into this the most in modern film is Richard Linklater, kind of an experimental slacker era director from independent film of the early 90s. We all love Dazed and Confused.
Who didn't love Dazed and Confused?
Impossible movie to not like. And that's a kind of movie where, the whole cast became famous freaks and geeks style. In 1995, he made his movie Before Sunrise, in which young Ethan Hawke and young Julie Delpy meet on a train into Vienna. Things kind of shot in real time. I assume you've seen these movies. The movie's kind of shot. It's a real-time conversation between these two star-crossed young lovers. Then they go their separate ways. And much as in the Up series, the real genius move came 9 years later, where he decided to check in with the characters again. Because that movie, like 7 Up, ends with a kind of a call to action. It's not the executive and the shop steward of the year 2000. It really is like, are these two going to meet again in a year?
Right.
And what will happen if they do?
Did you ever do that?
I have never had that. I mean, I've definitely had relationships in my 20s that had that kind of aura of magic, but it never had that kind of one magic night, maybe I'll see you again thing.
Because more than once, have you said, been? I'll meet you in the train station in Sevilla on this day in 2025.
We've got to do this. So what's your track record?
What's your 0 out of 0?
For
yeah. I had a woman say, like, if I haven't had a kid in 10 years, I'm going to find you and sure, we'll have a baby.
Runaway Bride made that kind of wager acceptable in our culture.
Yeah, and that unfortunately did not, or maybe fortunately, who knows?
For her, perhaps.
She did not meet me in the train station.
Have you ever shown up and been stood up?
No.
So you're the problem. Maybe all these women are showing up. Maybe they're still out there.
The problem is, you say that like, you're there over a pitcher of sangria and you're like, this 20 years from now, we'll meet again. But like 7 days later, I didn't remember the date. Like, what was it? Was it the 14th? Was it the 13th?
The Notes app having not existed at the time.
Yeah. Where in the train station? It's a big train station.
That's the great thing about now in the cell phone age. Everybody's just gonna set an alarm for. Like I had my phone, my calendar alarm went off 2 days ago, informing me that I was now 400,000 hours old.
I saw you posted that. 400,000 hours.
I had just remembered, apparently, at some point in the last decade, to set up a bunch of Google alerts. So today, all these young, starry-eyed lovers are actually going to meet up.
Right.
Because their phones are going to remind them, hey, this is when you said you were going to be at the top of the Empire State Building.
And you should go.
They're all going to show up.
I mean,
maybe we're speaking to descendants of all these amazing romantic relationships that actually happened.
My mom and dad didn't, were separated 15 years and then their phones went off.
So Richard Linklater has been checking in with Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy every 9 years again. And collaboratively.
Fortunately for him, they became stars.
Yes. And they collaborate. They're both very talented writers as well. So they all kind of co-write their own characters and collaborate on what should have happened to, I'm not going to remember their names, Renee and Tom.
I mean, what a great, fun thing that would be to be able to write the story of your
fictional self.
Your fictional self.
Who did actually meet again with the girl from Vienna. Linklater was apparently so taken by the effect of seeing those movies barely juxtapose past and present. I feel like Before Sunset does have some clips of Before Sunrise, but just very brief flashes. And of course, Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy are aging well enough that it doesn't seem like a special effect. But Linklater was just so taken with this idea of how movies can show you time in a way that paintings and novels have never been able to, that in 2001, he started a 12-hour movie project where he would follow this kid over his entire adolescence, his whole growing up period. He called it 12 Years. And then when 12 Years a Slave came out, he had to rename it Boyhood.
Uh-huh.
But he just found kind of a promising young kid from Austin. And every year he would check in with this kid and find out what had happened in his life and kind of incorporate that into a screenplay. And he would talk to his parent characters, played by Ethan Hawke again and Patricia Arquette, they both had to agree to have no work done because he wanted to have them age in real time up on the screen. And so for 12 years, they would meet in secret and make this secret movie.
And this was all fictionalized fact? They were using...
He would draw stuff from their lives. Like when Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman got divorced, Ethan Hawke's character in the movie, whose name I can't remember, became a divorced dad. You know, when Ethan started to get... When young... the actor's name is Eller Coltrane, I think. When young Coltrane started to get into...
Did you call me Coltrane?
No, I would never call you Coltrane, John, on so many levels. When he starts getting into art and music, suddenly his character Mason becomes a kind of a gifted artistic kid. I think it's in the movies, it's photography maybe. And I'm not sure if that's what it was in real life.
So this was not a project that was appearing in the Hollywood Reporter. This was all under wraps.
Under the radar. I don't know who's financing this. I think some studio must have thrown him some money. And he cast his own daughter as the little sister because she was such a show off. But this is going to happen to you as a dad. His daughter at some point was like, turned 11 and was like, I'm not going to be in your dumb movie, Dad. And he had to really twist her arm and, take away her iPhone to make her. So for the middle of this movie, his daughter kind of disappears. And then she kind of reasserts herself at the end when she comes out of her awkward phase.
Right, when she has her rockabilly band to promote.
Exactly. And when this movie was released as Boyhood in whenever that was, 2013 or thereabouts, it became one of the most acclaimed movies of the year because nobody had seen anything like it. To this day, it's the only movie to ever achieve 100% Metacritic rating in its initial release.
Is it good in your opinion?
I like Boyhood very much. Even apart from never having seen this stuff before, I think his casting is very canny. I like the way he kind of lets you see the era passing. You hear the movie starts with a Coldplay song because it's 2001 or whatever. Oh. And then you see the kids kind of get into the Harry Potter books and, you see them talk about just, whether there should be Star Wars sequels. It's not just you're seeing your adolescence go by, you're kind of seeing the early 2000s go by.
Right.
Which is very compelling.
Do you think when he got 12 years into it that there was a part of him that said like, we shouldn't put this out now. I should just keep going, make this movie over 25 years?
I kind of wonder if he's continued in secret to work with this cast.
Right. It seems like at 12 years, it's an award-winning movie. At 25 years, it becomes like a crazy raw vision, like outsider art project. And at 40 years, it becomes like you built the pyramids.
Well, that's kind of, the Up series kind of is building the pyramids. Apted is still alive and saying he wants to make 84 Up when he's 99. He has now lost one of the kids. One of the kids passed away this year, a couple of years ago, and in the latest film. This was just a working class girl who was a librarian, and no obituaries appeared in any of the papers. But, when her death was featured in the program, suddenly millions of people are appreciating her life,
right,
in a way that
someone erected a giant gravestone for her, and
there's a plaque installed to her honor in her children's library, and of course the film crew is there to capture that. And it really is kind of a time capsule of her life in a way that most people do not get.
I think maybe the most devastating thing to consider about a project like that would be that no matter what you did,
the ending is the same.
Well, not that, but that your highest accomplishment will have been one of these people.
I think about that a lot, having very early backed into that kind of, no matter what I do, right, I'm still the 29-year-old game show phenom.
The one that that'll be your first line in your obituary, except now you're the 45-year-old game show returning phenom. Right. America's most famous, the smartest boy in America.
But it would be as if I had to keep going on Jeopardy every 7 years as my faculties decline.
Right.
And my facilities, maybe,
sure,
if we get kicked out of our house.
No, I mean, your facilities are declining right in front of my eyes.
They're physically declining. You can measure in inches as my facilities decline. And honestly, that kind of awareness of aging is the thing I like about Boyhood. That moment. Do you like them? Do you know and like the movie Boyhood?
I have not seen it.
Oh,
for similar reasons.
Yeah. There's a movie. The Patricia Arquette character at the end is just, having realized her son is now leaving the house, she just breaks down. She thought there would be more. She says the suddenness of how time has passed, even though it's the paradox of how the days seem so long. But now in hindsight, the years seem so short.
I don't want to have this experience.
Nothing in her life has prepared her for this.
You're about to lose a kid, right?
It's going to happen to you as a parent. You may want to role play it on Netflix first. I'm just saying.
Every night I put her to bed and I'm like, good night, sweetie. Like, this moment will last forever.
You don't see the hourglass descending, but the sand is dropping. The Linklater has now taken this to its maybe absurd final extent. I've just heard that he's going to be working on a movie adaptation of the Stephen Sondheim musical Merrily We Roll Along, which, if you're a musical nerd, this follows a group of Broadway songwriters from being starry-eyed hopefuls in the 30s and 40s up to them as paunchy, successful movie executives in the 70s, 80s. But the clever conceit of the play is it goes backwards. It starts out with them as successful middle-aged people, and then you see how they, and in one case, a very unlikable one, and then you see how they got there as the musical rolls back a decade every act, basically. So
is it a thing where they start off with age makeup on and it gets taken away, or is it that...
I mean, on the stage, you can always get away with this kind of thing.
Right.
The audience knows they've sat in a building for 2.5 hours. They have no illusion that decades have passed. So by putting glasses on somebody, you can kind of suggest something.
Right, a bald wig.
Yeah, but give them a bald cap at intermission. But what Linklater is doing is he's shooting the thing backwards. He has started with the end of the movie when they're young, and he's shooting that now. And then in 5 to 10 years, he's going to get back together and shoot the middle of the movie. He's going to keep doing this for 20 years plus, or whatever it takes, until finally he shoots the beginning of the movie. And then he's going to release it in reverse order, and you're going to see actual actors Benjamin Buttoning back to their 20s.
Well, you hope he doesn't want to change the script somewhere along the line.
That's the thing about these movies. If Emma Watson from the Harry Potter movies, gets hit by a bus or drops out of acting or develops a drug problem, or, you're really kind of betting everything on an uncertain future.
Even that Richard Linklater isn't going to die with half of this project finished.
Exactly. And it's happened in the Up series. The kids may drop out, somebody, they're going to pass away at some point. The director might pass away. It's all uncertain, but that's kind of the beauty of it. It's going to be kind of an unfinished symphony. And it's something that, we've never been able to actually see before, a life in an hour or two.
It will really be interesting when futurelings listen to this program, having grown up and lived in a world where everyone's life is documented from birth, because you see now there are plenty of kids that have had a picture, 50 pictures of themselves posted every day by their
it's not even a novelty
doting
anymore.
Parents, so that you really could do a fast motion slideshow of them where you saw them grow every centimeter of their lives.
What do you think the effect of that is on society, of people being able to consider their lives that way in hindsight? Are people going to be less self-deluded?
What was the original appeal of Snapchat was that kids could communicate with each other and not leave any record. And at first, people our age suspected that it was just because they were sending sex pictures. But in fact, when you talk to young people, they're like, can we not just talk to each other and not leave
and not think about the imprint?
Yeah, just leave some record, some damning record. And when you think about it, when I was a kid, I mean, even in my 20s and 30s, I have a bundle of scented letters and leathers.
I know you have a bundle of scented
leathers, but a bundle of scented letters tied with a ribbon, and that's my only record of my communication with a half a dozen important people in my life. And can you imagine if you had every email and text that was ever sent to you by everyone? Maybe
the sheer volume of it means it's the same as having nothing. But I don't know, maybe the self-imposed surveillance state just makes us into better people. I mean, maybe in a semi-Orwellian way. But if you're always thinking about the imprint you leave, maybe you're less likely to indulge in casual cruelty, bad decisions that are a bad look.
Yeah, but then what you're doing is curating your life in real time and not living. Right? Every morning you wake up and you're like, better put on a good... It's like a Black Mirror episode.
But what a gift to the future. I had an awful 80 years in order to produce this amazing Instagram feed. Of course, no one will ever look at it. When you think about who visits cemeteries, the answer is a lot of people for a month and then nobody.
Who is ever going to watch the record of their grandmother, right? To sit down and say like, okay, I'm going to spend whatever 6 months of my life like absorbing every little diary entry of my grandmother.
Well, hopefully they listen to this. Hopefully this is
but this is
hopefully
sterling
this is
content.
This is the art that survives.
The thing is, my mother has read all of her grandmother's, reread all of the letters she got from her grandmother, looked at all the family Bibles. Like, it is a thing that we're inspired to do.
You want people to put in the work because I want access to my own family history.
Yeah.
I'm not doing the work to make sure my kids have it, but I should at some point.
If you could sit and read a daily record of the life of your ancestor who carried the rascal beater into that house in Nauvoo, you would.
Absolutely. And not even that. Like, I feel like if I just read about a random great uncle from the 1890s, I bet it would be just as compelling.
Right. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, futurelings, well, obviously they're listening to this program.
By definition, everyone you're talking to is listening.
Right.
Or have fallen asleep at this point. We're over the hour mark. So
we're well
if
over
futurelings still listen to this podcast to fall asleep at night, this is the part they never get to, where we reveal the secret of the universe at the end of every show. Sorry.
42.
Sorry, sleepyheads.
And that concludes Longitudinal Film, entry 734.PS9010, certificate number 48149 in the omnibus. Futurelings, we have already said everything there is to say in this episode.
We've covered an entire lifetime of human experience.
So I'm not going to bore you with a lot of flim-flam here at the end. You can find us at Omnibus Project, at Ken Jennings, and at John Roderick, anywhere you care to look. Please go to the Omnibus Project at gmail.com if you want to send us an email or your dating profile. You can go to our Futurelings Facebook page, our Reddit group, also under Futurelings. Please send us mail. We're doing a show now for Patreon donors where we open our mail and talk about some of the addenda people have sent in, some corrections. Argumentative emails go right into the circular file, but we love to hear from.
Is that true?
We love to hear from folks.
Only respectful feedback in the addenda.
You can mail us things at P.O. Box 55744, Shoreline, Washington 98155, including scented leathers tied with a ribbon.
I'm opening mail right now. Someone has sent you a copy of a Jules Pfeiffer cartoon book called Tantrum.
Love it. I love Jules Pfeiffer.
He's the best. And people have been sending me chick tracts, which I'm very relieved to hear.
Good. I know you've wanted
that'll be a
collection.
That'll be a future show.
But if you'd like to contribute to the show, we appreciate it very much, even though Ken is very famously a millionaire. He does not...
This is definitely how you inspire
He
giving.
does not give any of that money to me, first of all. He does not spend any of that money keeping the show going.
The game show money goes in the kids' college tuition bank.
He hoards that money because the kids have already got plenty of tuition money.
Unfortunately, Omnibus has to be financially viable.
He just sits on top of
from game shows.
His money. So if you send money to or support the show at patreon.com/Omnibus Project, Ken and I are working on some kind of prorated deal where I get all the money in order to. No, he's laughing now.
I'm opening more mail, and this is a. Is this the person who sent us the Mothman figurine?
I don't know. It looks like a deli tray.
It looks like a deli tray on the back, but it's actually a picture of the Mothman in some kind of hexagonal crystal prism, like the Mothman has been trapped in the Phantom Zone here with General Zod.
Whoa.
This is...
I hope that you enjoy taking that home with you today.
We're getting increasingly strange Mothman. I'm starting to think that John, who sends us this stuff, might be the Mothman.
I am the Mothman.
Is that right?
No. My daughter really enjoyed the Mothman. He has entered into the pantheon of My Little Ponies and To Train the Dragons. Yeah, he's like flying around the house all the time now.
Is he the bad guy of the My Little Ponies?
I keep thinking that he should be. He's pretty dangerous looking, but she doesn't. She seems to treat him just like all her other babies.
Sorry, I interrupted you to take out hexagonal imprisoned Mothman.
No, I don't think any of our listeners believed that you would give me all the money from our Patreon. but we do have expenses, and your support of the show has made it possible.
It's
and
viable now. Yeah, only thanks to generous listeners. We appreciate that. Listeners, from our vantage point in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived. We hope and pray that every moment of it was documented for you so that you can enjoy it. If the catastrophe of fear does not come, we would love that. It's a better ending for our longitudinal time capsule. But if the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may be our final word to you. We don't yet know if this is a comedy or a tragedy. If Providence allows, we certainly hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.